بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله دائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقال الله عز وجل في محكم كتابه المجيد: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وكذلك فتنا بعضهم ببعض ليقولوا هؤلاء من الله عليهم من بيننا أليس الله بعلم الشاكرين. I want to begin by thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity to visit Africa. It's my first visit here. I was in Mombasa for Muharram and then came here. Before I speak, just to give some context to my own experiences so that you can put some of what I will say in context, is that I am a director of a Sadiq Islamic School in Toronto. We have about 756 students. One of the largest, single Shia campuses in North America, by our standards, because it's 756 Shia students. So it's a 99% Shia Muslim school. Director of religion. So I deal with all kinds of things. I deal with 1,000 parents, 750 students, and about 60 or so staff in terms of working on spirituality, religious education, religious development, our spiritual and religious vision. In addition to working with Sayyid Muhammad Rizvi, who's our resident scholar within the center and who's also, of course, on the board of trustees of the school. So in the process of those experiences, you begin to, over several years, you begin to notice certain things. You begin to understand the way certain trajectories, certain movements, certain, how should I put, trends. So a lot of my discussions are often based on those experiences, or my observations through those experiences. And one of the things that I've noticed, if we wanted to describe the zaman in which we live, the time in which we live, we could certainly say it is a time of fitna. Fitna in the sense of a test, or chaos, or anarchy. And it reminds me of a tradition of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or rather a tradition of Amir al-Mu'mineen. We'll get to a tradition of the Prophet in a minute, where he says, جَعَلَ اللَّهُ فِي الْأُمَّةِ خَمْسَ فِتَنٍ. That God has placed made five fitan in this ummah, in this community. And it will rotate really between a general test and a specific test. A general test and a specific test. ثُمَّ الْفِتْنَةُ السَّوْدَاء الْمُظْلِمَةِ. Then a time will come of dark fitna. Sawda al-Mudhlima. Allahu Akbar. This is extremely profound. So then that time shall come, he says. And this is Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman in his various tawqi'at describes this time as fitnatul sawda, fitnatul mudhlima, which is the time in which the Prophet said, "Allati yusiru nas fiha kal bahaim," in which humans will become like animals. And this is the fitna in the world in which we live. So it can seem at times like a profoundly dark age, a difficult age in which to live. The Prophet has told Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anh, the companion of the Prophet, in a very long tradition, one of the most beautiful traditions on Akhir Zaman. It's narrated by Tabarasi and others in his Makaram al-Akhlaq and other sources. The Prophet tells Ibn Mas'ud, it's as I said, a very long and powerful discussion with ayat of Quran. But in that discussion, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi says, "Zamanu sabir fihi ala dinihi kamithlu al-qabid ala jamra." بِكَفِّهِ. That the time will come which is known as Zamanu Sabir, the time of the one who is Sabir or Sabira, we could say. And what is a characteristic of this time, which was unlike any other time before in the human race? What is it? He says that his or her religion, meaning their religion, will be like holding يعني قابض على الجمر بكفه, that it will be like holding a red hot coal in your hand, and your faith, your deen will be burning through your hand, and holding on to it will be like that. That's how difficult it will be. A time will come, and for my community, in my ummah, where holding on to deen will be like holding on to a red hot ember coal in one's hand. You know those coals that they use for barbecue or for for heating things? When it turns pitch red, fully red, that's what the al-jamr. And that's how the deen will be, right? And we're told in the end of time, since it's the days where mothers will no longer want to have children, where children will become a burden. Fathers and mothers and couples will no longer want to have children. We're told these are the days when there is not a wolf of the dhi'b, illa ya'kulu dhi'b. This is a day that the Prophet says in which there will not be a wolf except he will eat another wolf. Now wolves don't eat wolves, they eat sheep. There's a depth to this statement, a very profound depth to this statement. That there'll be no more sheep left. The sheep will all be left sleeping out to pasture. The wolves will be eating wolves. This is a world in which we live, a world in which we send our children sometimes off to get an education, let's say to do an MBA, to do a master's in finance. I myself have a PhD, so I'm not condemning people who have doctorates or degrees. I've spent the last 18 years in education. So that's not what I'm saying. I teach in university, so I'm speaking from my own experiences in this field as well. We send our kids off to do master's degrees. Many of you may have sent your children abroad, I would assume, to Canada or UK or America or wherever it is, or South Africa, wherever it is you send them, or right here in Tanzania. But in many cases, this community tends to send their children abroad. Preferably to the best schools, and parents expend a lot of money in that regard. Right? Paying international fees, we know, of course, can be very burdensome. But to achieve what? Let me give you an example here. Now, it's good that I have an audience here that is certainly old enough to know this. In 2008, the global financial system nearly came to complete disaster and collapse. Right? We saw in Dubai, in London, New York, all these cities, real estate was collapsing. They were saying that the bank machines were not going to spit out money, that they were going to run out of money. Right? The US was in complete crisis. They said that it was as bad as the 1929 Depression. So the world economy was coming to nearly to a complete halt. But why? Why? How? How could such a thing happen? The answer is, well, the very kids that we send off to school developed ways to steal and rip people off. That's what they did with their education at Harvard and Yale. They developed ways to develop lending practices and mortgages and financial instruments by which they could rob the elderly and rob the firemen's union and rob doctors and average people by developing financial instruments, financial packages, loans. You don't want to get into the complex areas of the economics of it. But basically, they use that education to become animals. يُسِيرُ كَالْبَهَائِمِ. All that money spent, right, at Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia, all these great schools, London School of Economics, right? Oh, Omar Chokro, he went to LSE, very good, very good, very good. Did an MBA, very good, very good, fine. To learn what? To do what? The top of them end up at Goldman Sachs, that's their dream, JP Morgan. They're the ones responsible for robbing the world of hundreds of billions, if not trillions rather, of dollars in developing more, in writing up mortgages that are subprime. And then what they did, right? Because we often say, oh, mashallah, he went to Princeton or he went here, he has an MBA from this university. So what did they do with this MBA? Because these are the people that are chosen for the top positions at Goldman, the top positions at JP Morgan, the top positions at HSBC in the finance departments. What did they do with this? They gave people loans, and then they had rating agencies. And poor Africans, of course, were just completely pawns in this, right? Ponzi's in this. So they said, okay, we're going to give you a loan. And that loan, the money that we've borrowed, is secured. Meaning, you know what? It's not going to go anywhere. We know it's safe. The money is safe, okay? So they rated it AAA, let's say. Meaning 1A is okay, 2A is good, 3A is perfect. Meaning that the money is safe. Your money is safe in the bank. It's not going to go anywhere. Right? When you go and you deposit your money in a Tanzanian bank, your hope is that it's AAA. Tomorrow you're not going to come to their bank. They're going to say all your savings are gone. But the people who rated it AAA knew it wasn't AAA. Because they were in cahoots with Goldman, with JP, with all these banks. They still are. To package loans as AAA, when in reality they're not AAA. So, and they were being paid to rate them as AAA, when in reality they were not AAA at all. That's one thing. Then they would take these investments, let's say the firemen, the policeman union, every month they put $100 in every policeman, right? Every month a policeman put $100 into their fund and say, you look, when I retire, this is my retirement package. I need to live off this investment. I'm 70 years old. I don't want to work the rest of my life. I want to have retirement. So they'll go to that same bank and they'll tell that same bank, we're giving you all our money, all the policemen, or let's say of Dar es Salaam. We're going to give you all our savings invested as a retirement fund. So these people in the banks, they take it, and then you know what they did? They bet against the very investments that they took. So they bet that these investments would go down. They shorted them. And this was legal. It still is legal. And then when it hit rock bottom, all these firemen lost all this money because the loans, all these investments and loans were packaged as AAA, but in reality they weren't. They were extremely risky. So you had tens of millions of people who went bankrupt, lost their entire retirement. You had the entire world economy come to a halt. You had Iceland file for bankruptcy. Things were going, you had, of course, the ripple effects were in Dubai and others, and I'm sure those of you or your husbands that were in business were hurt badly by that in 2008. Why? Because the very people that were trusted to manage this were themselves betting against the very people that they took on as clients. So my question is, we send people off to school to get an MBA to these great schools so that they can become animals and thieves? What is education for? To become a better human being. We have to ask ourselves, what is the purpose of our life? This is coming back to the Prophet's hadith, but I wanted to give a very practical example. Something that everyone can understand, because everybody wants their kids to be educated. Everybody wants to send their kids off to a good business school or to a good university. Do we send people off to become doctors so that they could come up with new ways to, facilitate abortion, new kinds of medicines that they can develop in laboratories. Sometimes we don't, as human race, as human beings I'm speaking, we don't ask about the ethics of education. Right? It's all about achieving a particular position, achieving a particular status, achieving a particular position, whether it be in a bank or a company or a firm or whatever it is, but at whose expense? At what expense? To what extent? And I think that as human beings, this is what the Prophet says, that الناس يصيروا كالبهائم, that human beings will become like beasts, and the wolf will be eating the wolf. The sheep will be completely asleep in their bed, ignorant, watching their television, having no idea what's going on in this world. Because they've been given a sleeping pill by those wolves, that, you know what, you keep busy, we're tired of eating you, we're not interested in you, now we're going to eat each other. Which is what this is. The whole global banking system is of this nature, the whole thing. So when we send our kids off to education, I'm not condemning education. What I'm asking is, what ethics and morals do they have in mind as they go off to school? To become what exactly? To become whom? To serve whom? What institutions are they serving? What institutions of power are they serving? Right? This may seem philosophical, but it's not. It's a reality. Everybody wants their kids to be successful. Certainly. There's no doubt about that. And I'm not saying we don't want our youth and children to be successful. That's not what I'm saying at all. But we have to ask at what cost, for whom, and with what set of morals will they become successful? What does it mean to be successful in the eyes of Allah and His Messenger? We're told that fi akhir zaman, the aql of insan will be so polluted it will no longer find room for God. So for example, atheists, right? We're told this is a time in which the belief in God, aslan, will leave people's minds and hearts, right? So the atheist often says, how could God create a world? So this is another aspect of fitna in this time. Atheists will say, how can God create a world in which there is so much evil? The atheist will say, how can God allow this to happen? Right? That's often the atheistic argument, right? That I lived for 20 years in an abusive relationship. My husband was beating me, let's say, na'udhu billah, la samhallah. And I couldn't get out of that relationship. And this religion is to blame, and God is to blame, and this man by the name of Muhammad ibn Abdullah is to blame. So I'm becoming an atheist, they say, right? I'm leaving this religion and I'm turning back and this, ila akhir al-kalam. Fine. Okay. I would ask two questions to that individual. I'm just giving an example. We have so many of these examples in the West, right? Every day people popping up like this. It's nothing new. I mean, it really isn't. Anyhow. But the question that I would then ask is, first, maybe your opinion of God is incorrect. Maybe you have too ideal of an opinion of what God is. Let me get to this in a moment. Secondly, the question is, I will get to that, okay? Don't worry, I'll get to that. Second question is, how can we allow this to happen as a human race, as a human community? God has every right to ask us the same question, that I gave you power, reason, knowledge, and free will, the ability to speak, the ability to control our appetite, the ability to control our temper, the ability to control our desires. We are the only being that has free will in this sense, that has consciousness. And He will ask us, and you do this? The question is not where is God, where are we as insan? We always ask, where is God? The question is, where are we? God has always been there. But as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if they choose to turn away from this religion, He will bring a people who love him and he loves them. So he's saying, I'm here. I'm here, I love you. I'm ready to love you. But you have to be hadir and present. Ya ayyuhal insan. So the question is not where is God, the question is where are we? And they say, well, did God assault women? Did God assault children? Did God assault 19,000 children in the United States who have been assaulted? Sorry, 190,000 children in the United States who are currently, we know, have been registered, have been assaulted by a Catholic priest? Did God assault them? Did God come in their mind and tell them to assault those children, to abuse those children in Boston, Pennsylvania, and all these various states? And this is just in the US, not in the UK and other places. I mean, the numbers are mind-boggling. And people say God is not listening to us. Is insan listening to God? He said, "La tufsidu fil ard ba'da islahiha." Don't spread corruption in the earth after I've made it, after it's been made pure for you. ذَلِكُمْ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ إِن كُنْتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. That is best for you if you are believers. A'raf 75. لا تفسدوا في الأرض بعد إصلاحها. And people ask, where is God? He has given us Islah. He has given us tayyibat. He has given us an earth that is beautiful and that is pure. Did God place the plastic bottles in the ocean? No. Did God tell us to become like animals? As the Prophet says, yusiru kal baha'im? No. With all this will and technology and power and money, and how do we let all this evil happen in our world? What is our responsibility for the evil, whether it be in our family or our community or our society? Did God make the nuclear bomb for us? Did God tell them that mother and father, that money and career is more important than instilling the love of God and His messenger in the heart of their children? No. Did God tell people to play with the economy like as if it's their personal bank account? So that oil prices would raise 45%, 25% in some countries, rendering most Egyptians unable to even buy daily bread? And poor and hungry? No. He gave us an economy of justice. So my point is that human beings have to take responsibility for their own doings in this world. And we can't constantly be blaming everybody else for it. It's not God. God is saying, stop pointing the finger at me. And secondly, obviously, God is not the one to be questioned, but human beings are to be questioned for what they have done. And I could go on and on, but my point is that ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس. That corruption will appear in the land, in the sea, by what the hands of human beings have reaped. لِيُذِيقَهُمْ بَعْضَ الَّذِي عَمِلُوا لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجِعُونَ. Why? So that they shall taste their corruption. They shall taste the corruption that they have sowed. They shall taste the corruption that they themselves are the source of. لِتُذِيقَ لِيُذِيقَهُمْ بَعْضَ الَّذِي عَمِلُوا لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجِعُونَ. It's the hands of insan that have done this, not God. Yet insan would question God. Let me give you a beautiful example before I end here. There was a Frenchman who wrote a book called And Then There Was Light. A very beautiful book. He lived during the Second World War. He lost his eyesight around the age of 7 or 8, and he wrote about basically life being without without being able to see. And he says, I thank God every day that I lost my eyesight when I was a boy, a young child, because I never questioned the will of God. Children don't question the will of God. We do. We do, because for whatever reason, we do. Children don't. If you ever visit a cancer ward, and I have visited many, many cancer wards. We have one of the largest cancer wards in the world for children in Toronto, at the Hospital for Sick Children. Go and visit sometime. These 7, 8-year-olds, 9-year-old children that are bald, suffering from, dying of leukemia or Hodgkin's or some kind of, cancer or debilitating illness. Why are they always smiling? Because that innocence of their soul is still there. And you'll notice that the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most beloved friends of Allah, have that same innocence. Allah, they have that same innocence. Those that are closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have that same innocence and purity in their hearts. But the Prophet says we become like animals. Yusiru kal-baha'im. We're not born like that, but we become like that. There's a process of becoming like that. That child does not question God even for a moment. Does not question, why me? Why do I have cancer? Human beings do. Adults do. And it's adults that spoil children. It's adults that ruin kids. That is the reality. We ruin children. We poison them. Whether we know it or we don't, we do it in different ways. As insan, I'm not saying you, as a human race. Question, God did not do that. God did not rip that belief out from their heart. We did. So we have to take accountability as a society and as a community and as parents, as women and men and stakeholders as to why those things occur. And take stock of ourselves, of our own hearts. That we have to have a heart checkup for ourselves as to what's going on in there. And then I think we can begin to answer certain questions or venture to come up with solutions, which then, problems will always be there because we live in the time of fitna, and that is true. But the first solution has to be a deep sense, or the beginning of a solution has to be a deep sense of self-examination, looking within ourselves, asking ourselves, have I understood my religion? Really? Or how much of what I do is based on some practices that I don't understand? Who is God to me? What is God? Not the God that I've imagined in my mind. Coming back to the beginning, that these atheists think that, well, God owes me something. Who said God owes us anything? God has given us creation, and that's sufficient. He's created us. He's given us existence and wujud. Where does the idea come from that he somehow owes us something? Did he say that he's going to give us something? That he's going to ensure that there's no evil in the earth, that there's no suffering in the earth, that there are no tests? If he said that, then fine. If God said that, then go ahead, hold him accountable for it. He's not said that, though. Maybe that's a God that individual has invented in their mind. What I call, they have an opinion of God which is, more idealistic than the Prophet himself. It's not true. It doesn't work that way. As Mullah Satara says very well in his commentary on a very beautiful hadith and an ayah of Quran, وَمَا أَصَابَكُم مِّنْ حَسَنَةٍ فَمِنَ اللَّهِ وَمَا أَصَابَكُم مِّن سَيِّئَةٍ فَمِن نَفْسِكَ. Very important ayah of the Quran, that whatever goodness happens to you, whatever goodness you have, hasana in your life, it's from Allah. But whatever evil that occurs, it's from yourself. Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it clear. Sadra, he says something so beautiful, again based on a riwayah, of course, in his commentary on Al-Kafi, he says something so beautiful. He says that, think of the human world as life as like a line. God has created it straight. He's given us messengers, He's given us principles of justice, ethics, humanity, fine. The Sharia, the way towards faithfulness, fine. If we were to just follow it, we would have a much easier time in life. But we are the ones that make it zigzag. We are the ones, not God. God didn't make it zigzag. Banu Umayyah may have tried to say that in order to absolve themselves of the death of Imam Hussein by saying, oh, well, your Lord wished that Hussein be killed. And these arguments of Qadariyah and these arguments have been, of course, dispelled and they're into the dustbin of history. But average Muslim today does not believe in this idea that God, that Banu Umayyah, for example, is not responsible for the death of Hussein because God determined that Banu Umayyah would kill Imam Hussein alayhi salam. This is such an illogical, irrational argument that never survived in Islamic history, and no, Ash'ari or 12er Shi'i, meaning among the most important schools of theology ever held this argument, because it was completely opposed to the Quran entirely. And I would also, because atheists are not, why would God wish this or wish this, wish this? At the end of the day, how arrogant are we to think that we should have access to what God knows or what God does not know? Why? Why should we? How should we? As human beings, I'll give you the example, I'll just end with this. Think of it like a frog at the bottom of a water well. Right? They build a lot of wells here in Tanzania, right? Bores, right? To get water. Right? I visited this Kibaha recently. Yesterday, mashallah, may Allah give them more tawfiq in serving humanity, right? In using their wealth and their health and their strength to make this place a better world, not a more evil place. And they build wells, right? Imagine this. If the frog is living at the bottom of the well, that's the world that he knows. He's swimming in that little water, jumping up and down. That's it. He's maybe being sustained as some fish or, I don't know, some dirt or something for him to eat in that well. Is it fair for the frog to say, I've never seen a mountain, so now I'm going to deny it, that it exists? The mountains exist. The frog has never seen it. Is it the frog's fault? Is it the mountain's fault that they've been denied because the frog cannot see it? That's where the frog lives. Why should the frog deny that the mountain exists? It is completely illogical. He's a frog. That's a mountain. They're not the same. He lives in the bottom of a well. Just because he can't see that mountain, why should he deny that that mountain exists? That is the height of arrogance. The height of foolishness. The height of human hubris. Hubris meaning that sense of overbearing self-worth. That why should the frog even think that he deserves to see those mountains? Why? What has that frog done that says that I want to see those mountains? What have you done? What have you achieved that you say you deserve to see those mountains? Maybe it's enough to just believe in those mountains. And maybe one day you will see them, or one day you will experience them, or one day you will, have some closer understanding of what those mountains are. Allahu A'lam. And that's where this whole search during our time requires humility. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa tayyibin at-tahirin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Are there any questions? Yeah, so, the general fitness could be, we all have general tests in everyday life, right? So we have tests with our wealth and our children. Those are general fitna in the Quran, right? We have tests with our wealth. Sometimes we have it, sometimes we don't. That is a fitna. What are we going to do when we don't have it? What are we going to do when we have it? They're both a fitna at every time, right? And raising our children, if our children go on a path that is not supported by Allah and His Messenger, will we still support our children? So that's a general fitna. And the fitna khasa could be Al-Imam Hussein's rising. Right? So the Ummah was given a very specific test. That Hussein is rising up. He is calling the community towards Islah, towards righteousness. What will they do? That's a very specific test, not fitna khasa. But after this period will now come a period of darkness. And this is a period in which the belief in God, aslan, will begin to leave people's hearts. Any kind of life of devotion will begin to leave people's hearts altogether, right? The time when they'll be holding on to religion like a hot coal in their hands, right? Zamanu sabir. And then it will burn through their palms of their hands. Right? The time of great ilhad, widespread ilhad, or the traditions say, the days in which scholars, now this is not Shia or Sunni, this is Muslim in general, and we already see this in the Muslim world, where scholars will be so corrupt that they will sit, يَجْلِسُونَ مَعَ أَشْرَارِ خَلْقِ اللَّهِ, that they will sit with the most evil of God's creation. That a day will come where you will find the most evil of Allah's creation sitting next to the ulama in one sitting. We are already in that time. Saudi, Misr, Jordan, where are we? That Zaman has already arrived. This is the end game. This is the end time. All these things have already come true in this sense. Many of these things. Today, there is seldomly any Muslim scholar from the other school of thought that is independent of any evil tyrant government. Saudi, Jordan, Egypt, Sudan, good portion of North Africa, Pakistan. Where is the independence of scholars to make the decisions of justice and fair play in the society? Where? Those few have been silenced. The ones who have any kind of authority are complete puppets of governments. A day will come, that is the fitna to Sultan, of dark days, where scholars will become compromised, na'udhu billah. That those that are trusted. Now, we see that, he says, in the ummah in general, okay? Not talking about the followers of Ahlul Bayt, salamullahi alayhim. This is in the ummah in general. We already see this. We already see this in the Middle East. We already see this in many parts of the world. Right? How do these tyrannical regimes continue to live, to go on every day? With whose blessings? The person reciting the Jummah is the Chamcho has been literally appointed by the tyrant who's been in power for whatever, 50, 60 years, by the military governments of all these countries while the people are starving and dying of hunger, and these leaders of these Muslim governments are living in palaces. There you go, right? So that's another example of what the fitna to Sawda al-Mudlima is, that dark fitna. And then, of course, there are other examples, like not wanting to have children. There never has a time come in human history until now that the human beings have come up with ways of killing kids before they're born. Right? Not here in Tanzania, but in America and Canada and Europe, Sweden, all these countries, these practices are very well known. Right? That they come up with new ways, what they call humane ways, to eliminate a fetus or a child before its birth, right? Before 3 months or something like this, right? Take pills. So if they can't take pills, and they, na'udhu billah, give them some kind of vacuum device or something like this, right? So these are people with PhDs from Harvard, mashallah. Best schools. They've been to the best schools to learn how to kill in new ways. Or build bombs. They've been to the best schools. The people who build the best bombs have went. The University of Chicago, Harvard, Yale, Princeton. Isn't it? The best jobs are for weapons companies. Raytheon. Best jobs in America, Canada, UK are with weapons companies. We know that. Nobody pays like a weapons company pays. I mean, you would make double than what you would make in any other firm. This is dark times. Human beings use their education to come up with new ways to kill, to build nuclear bombs and things like this. So there are so many examples. So this is fitna to sawda. This is what we call the dark fitna. Al-mudhlima. Sahib al-Ashr wa Zaman has referred to this also in his letters. Are there any other questions? We have, I think, what, 5 minutes until the end. I ended, after about 35 minutes speaking, just so it can be a chance to ask questions. Yes?
So you mentioned about God not being the reason of aggression. It's us humans ourselves. But when atheists question today about how peaceful Islam is, they say that what about what the Quran says about the punishment of, let's say, the homosexuals? In today's time, that is, Allah curses them, and Allah curses the people of youth. So, I mean, they start questioning that if your religion is peaceful and if humans are a reason of oppression and corruption, then this is what Allah has written in the Quran. So how peaceful is that?
Define peace. Again, their idea of peace is something they've concocted in their mind. Peace cannot exist without justice. And in order for justice to occur in the society, there has to be a certain wholesome way of living. It's simple as that. So, for example, they would say in the United States, why do they still have capital punishment? They'd say, why is it illegal to marry more than, they would turn the coin and say, well, why is it illegal to marry more than one woman if your first wife agrees in the U.S.? Isn't that against peace? Isn't that against human liberty? Every society has certain norms and ethical paradigms through which they live their life, right? And nowhere along the way in the Quran or any religious tradition has it said peace is absolute. I think that is a fallacy in itself. We can discuss that philosophically, the conception of silm. What is silm? What is peace? I think that is a slightly idealistic way of looking at the world. That's not the way Islam looks at it, or Judaism, or Christianity, or any religion. They say peace comes with justice, justice comes with conditions. And you cannot have peace without justice. There has to be a sense of justice. And that justice has different realms, it has different aspects to it, one of it being justice of ethics and morality. So if we see a kind of behavior that is rampant within the society, what do we do? If we know it's affecting the family, we know it's affecting human life, we know that it's affecting the broader world, do we stand by and say, peace, 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 let everyone live in peace? No. No country in the world, no human being would stand by and say that, oh, just have peace. So when it comes to marrying more than one wife, no, well, what about that? They would say, no, that's unjust. You can go to jail, big prison sentence for that. In the UK and Canada and places like that. I don't know about African countries. So Islam comes with a certain set of values. If somebody wants to disagree essentially with those values, then they have to then say that that then I have a problem with God. And if they have a problem with God, that's fine. I mean, in the sense that, but just admit that, right? That you have a problem with God, and I'm going to believe in God on my terms, on what I want, on how I want. But then the problem is that I know I'm at the bottom of the well. So that's the life, that's the world, my world will be limited to the bottom of the well in which I live. That's then denying that their experience is beyond my understanding. Life then becomes very tragic. It becomes very tragic then, because now we're limited to a world which, and a life that's not very nice. Which, without any kind of transcendence above this physical, worldly existence. And then they would be considered materialists from a philosophical perspective. So there's so many different implications to that argument. So I think someone could say that, let's say, certain verses of the Quran, from the perspective of someone who believes that human beings determine, should be the final arbiters and the sole arbiters of what peace entails. From that perspective, yes, then the Quran would seem to be unjust. So what philosophy, what perspective are we approaching the nature of peace? That's a question that I would ask. And then we can agree to disagree, that's fine. I have a perspective, they have a perspective. Imam Sadiq used to let the atheists live. They used to come to him in Makkah and argue with him. I don't believe in any God, prove it to me. And he would sit and he would discuss with them. So people are, human beings have a mind, they have their own free will. But we, of course, have our own beliefs, and we have our evidences for our beliefs, and a very profound philosophical, scholastic, and logical reasons for why we believe in what we believe and why we understand them. Yes. I think we have a few more minutes, or 1 or 2 more minutes. Any other questions, sisters? No? Okay. Inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.